Why do we feed our plants? Healthier plants produce more flowers, more fruit, and they develop better resistance to diseases, drought, and even insects. And in the case of our vegetable garden, we just plain get more vegetables out of healthy plants. So it's a good idea to feed your plants. Now, you decide to feed your plants, you walk into the garden center with all the best intentions, and you're confronted with a wall of options. Lots of pretty pictures. There may be celebrity endorsements and all kinds of things that you're just not going to understand. So how do you pick out the right plant food for what you're trying to feed? Well, you need to learn your NPKs, the up, down, and all around of NPKs. Here we have a picture of a bag of 5-10-5, pretty common vegetable garden food for years, or even for flowers you could use 5-10-5. Well, what do those three numbers represent? They represent nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, always in that order. And it's that ratio, 5-10-5, 10-6-4, and so on, that will always tell you what a plant food's going to do. So the first number, 5 in this case, is nitrogen. Nitrogen stimulates upgrowth. We want to remember, up, down, all around. So the first number is upgrowth, nitrogen. Leaves on trees, blades on grass, needles on evergreens. Generally, upward growth is stimulated by nitrogen. The middle number, down, is phosphorus. Phosphorus stimulates root growth and also enhances flower and fruit production. So up for nitrogen, down for phosphorus. The third number is all around complete conditioning with potassium. Potassium helps the plant use the nitrogen and the phosphorus efficiently, as well as moving carbohydrates and other vital ingredients that the plant needs all throughout the plant. So complete conditioning. So just remember, up, down, all around. When you're looking at 5-10-5, you can see less nitrogen, more phosphorus for the vegetables or flowers, and 5% potassium to help those components work. So let's look at some other plant foods. Here's some lawn foods. On the left, we have a regular strength lawn food for an established lawn. We don't need to grow a root system too much, so it's got lots of nitrogens to stimulate blade growth so the lawn greens up and starts growing a little quicker in the spring. On the right side, we have a seed starting formula, 14-19-14. You can see it's fairly balanced, but it's got more phosphorus than anything else. Remember, phosphorus is that middle number of up, down, all around. Downward growth, root growth. That's what you need on a brand new lawn, is a root system establishing quickly, and that's what that middle number phosphorus does. Let's look at some more examples. We have a lot of these Espoma high quality organic foods that you can use to plant to feed just about any plant that you have in your garden. Remember, with organic foods, the numbers will always be a little bit lower because they don't use chemicals to derive the nutrients, and so the numbers will be a little bit lower if they come from organic sources. So let's see how our up, down, all around theory holds up here. Well, here's a look at Espoma's foods for our flowering and fruiting plants. You can see the numbers are very similar, generally conforming to our up, down, all around theory. 3-4-3, 3-4-4, 3-4-6, the first three, flower tone, garden tone, tomato tone, all very similar. The difference is flower tone has only 1% sulfur, nominal amount that plants need. Garden tone has 2%, since most vegetables like a slightly acidic soil, and tomatoes like the soil even a little bit more acidic, and because they produce large fruits, the potassium number for the good cell growth and strong, sturdy tomatoes is important for them. Now, the rose tone on the right seems to be the odd man out with the higher nitrogen, but about 1/3 of the nitrogen is soluble, very quickly released, so it feeds the plant a little bit more quickly to get some quick growth on it. And we do prune roses regularly, so there is a little bit of an extra demand for nitrogen. So there are some exceptions to the rule, but generally these are conforming to our up, down, all around theory. Now we take a look at tree tone and holly tone, the plant foods from Espoma that we would use for our larger landscape plants and evergreens. And you can see higher nitrogen in both cases. So this is exactly what we want to see in a plant food for foliage plants or for evergreens. Now, the big difference here, of course, too, is that the holly tone has more sulfur in it because evergreens are acid-loving plants, and sulfur will cause the soil to become slightly more acidic. But not all evergreens prefer an acidic soil. For instance, arborvitaes. You want to use tretone for that because it doesn't have all the sulfur in it that arborvitaes don't prefer, although that would be hollytone for a spruce tree or a rhododendron, plants that do prefer an acidic soil. Now let's take a look at tree food spikes. As you would expect, the fruit tree spike is higher in phosphorus and potassium, and the tree food spike and the evergreen spike, both because they're promoting leafy growth, or blades or needles on the evergreens are higher in the nitrogen. So that all makes sense. But what if you had a large flowering shrub that's almost the size of a tree, like a lilac? So it's a flowering plant. Perhaps the fruit tree spike would be more appropriate in that case. Once you know your NPKs, you can kind of decide on your own what would the most appropriate food be for the plant that you're actually feeding. Then we get into soluble plant foods. These need to be mixed with water. These are generally used in container plants filled with annuals or even annuals in the ground where you're trying to push them into peak performance. But in containers, when you're watering, you're washing the food out, so you're going to use these more frequently, so the numbers are a lot higher because they'll go through the plant food a lot quicker, and they also lose some when you're watering. But you can see the logic holds true here. High second and third numbers because these are flowering plants. On the left, you'll see the general purpose soluble food. It's kind of trying to do everything, so it's just balanced 20-20-20. If you know what your plants need, though, you don't need a general purpose food. Pick a food that actually has a purpose. Now, here we have the evergreen soluble foods like mere acid and the acid special from Jack's. Doesn't surprise me to see that they both are very high in nitrogen. These are soluble foods that you'll very often use in spring to kind of help the plants recover from any winter damage that they might have. Then there's biotone. Biotone seems to break the rules. It's a starter food. The formula is 4-3-3, but it's higher in nitrogen, but a lot of that nitrogen is quicker release to get some plants off to a quick start, which you could expect in a starter food. But it does have plenty of the phosphorus and potassium. The real bonus of biotone is that it contains 8 strains of mycorrhizal fungi as well as other soil organisms that will benefit the plant. Mycorrhizal fungi grow on and around the root system of the plant, and they help the plant gather phosphorus from the soil. It's particularly effective in bad soils, so it can be a real kind of miracle worker in certain conditions. The other nice thing about mycorrhizal fungi that are in the biotone is they last forever. They grow on for years and years and years. As long as that plant is growing, they'll even head off to other plants and start benefiting them as well. So you kind of consider this a superfood. It's not just a starter food. If you've never fed your perennials or your shrubs and trees with biotone, it wouldn't be too bad of an idea to try that out. So remember, if you remember your up, down, all around, your NPKs, when you walk into that garden center and you're confronted with all those options, you know a little bit about what those 3 numbers do, you'll be able to pick out the appropriate plant food for exactly what you're feeding. For Hewitt's Garden Centers, this is Peter Bowden.